Hugh Newman gives us a full update on what's been going on at the 12,000-year-old site in southeast Turkey known as Karahan Tepe, Gobekli Tepe, which are ruins from the ancient past. All right, let's talk about your latest discoveries. You're going to be presenting at the conference as well, Origins Conference. And there's been some discoveries there. Why don't you talk a little bit about the latest research that you have uncovered?
Well, yeah, I mean, the whole area, which has become known as Tas Tepeler, which basically means stone hills, is growing. I mean, we're talking, for a while, a long while, there was only Göbekli Tepe. That was the big site, dates to 11,600 years ago. Now we've got Karahan Tepe, there's Sayburc, there's some sites that are just being started to be excavated, like Harbet Zuvan, Sefir Tepe, Chakmak Tepe, even Ayan La Hoyak as well, which we'll talk about shortly. So there's a whole load of stuff kind of going on there, and it's stretching, into a wide area, which I call a super civilization. That's going to be the kind of title of the next book that me and JJ are working on. But if we start at Göbekli Tepe, for instance, let's just because there's actually brand new stuff coming out of there. There's more controversies coming out of there as well, which I think are going to surprise people. Obviously, we've got the main enclosures there everyone knows about.
Hmm.
There's talk now of a new GPR scan is going to be taking place. There's one that was done in 2014 or between 2012 and 2014, but they're going to be
Ground
doing a new
penetrating
scan.
radar.
Yeah,
Okay.
ground penetrating radar, and then they're going to decide what they're going to do next because there's all the olive trees, which was a big controversy. They've all now gone. There's
Yeah, let me
none
stop you
left.
just for a minute, Hugh. There's been a lot of discussion of corporations buying the facility and not excavating it anymore. Apparently, I can't remember who was talking about it, but it's gotten to the point where it's a museum rather than an archaeological site. What's the story on that?
Yes, so there's been a lot of debate. There's a gentleman called Jimmy Corsetti
Jimmy
who's
Corsetti, yes, thank
he
you.
does Bright Insight. He's a
Right.
very interesting chap. He's been really pushing because he's done a lot of research on it. He I kind of assisted him with a little bit of that actually, and he's found that there's a involvement from the WEF, the World Economic Forum. They had a big thing about Göbekli Tepe in Davos when they had the big meeting there.
Right.
He's found out over 20 million of funding, euros, has come in. And it's almost started since then, they've slowed down the excavation and focused on conservation and tourism and building all this stuff over the site, there's some new stuff I'm going to show you which is a bit, I'm not too keen on that they've
Well, the
been
reason
doing
I'm
at the site.
interrupting you is that Corsetti showed some photos of these olive trees planted on the archaeological site. It's like
That's right.
insane. Who allowed that?
But they've been there for years. I mean, they've been there since I've been going there.
Okay.
And I think it wasn't, I don't think it was when they were planted, it was planted by the family to
The owner of the,
improve the
okay.
soil, improve the kind of increase the value of the site, so they get more commission and things like this. But then they realized, there's a debate as to whether they realized they were causing damage underneath, or whether Jimmy
Yes,
pushed forward to kind of get them removed. But whatever happened, I think Jimmy was doing the right thing and bringing that to people's
I
attention.
think so as
And now,
well.
and now they've removed all of them. And so now they're going to do a GPR scan, which is fascinating. And they've actually, as we'll see in a moment, they've changed some of the pathways.
So I was there
So
2 years ago, and you're saying that they have removed all of the olive trees on all sides of the area?
yeah, the whole site is now kind of gone.
Wow.
Yeah, none left. I mean, there's a handful left. That's it. It's just a
Wow.
few. So it's
Okay.
not too much really.
So what's the
Um,
latest discoveries? Talk a little bit about what they have uncovered.
well, when we were there, if you look at this, there's this discovery was found in the wall. If people can see this image, it's quite well known. You can Google it, you can see it online. They found this human statue. It's about 3 feet long inside a wall. The one in the middle is actually a representation of another statue that was found several years ago, which is similar to it. And they've kind of put that now in the museum. So people don't know whether, because it was placed in the wall, it was some kind of votive offering, or whether it was just used as it was a knackered old bit of stone and they used it as a brick, in a wall, which I think is quite interesting. So there's different debates about what that is. But often, when you're placing stuff like that, it's like it's in the foundations. And so to me, it feels like, although it's probably added later after the main site had been constructed, it is has meaning. It's not just placed there randomly. And I think that's my opinion on it, based upon other stuff they found, which has been placed in walls, other sites, and things like this, which seem to have meaning as well. But what their meaning is, we don't know. But it doesn't have any legs. It's like hands sort of coming up, almost coming up the front like this, not really touching the navel. They're kind of coming up the front,
Hmm.
and it's got a kind of unusual, kind of almost alien-like head on it, which we find in many of the statues at Göbekli Tepe. But
Hmm.
while we were there, this was being discovered, and so we found this quite intriguing. And soon after, and then it got announced like 2 days after we were there in September 2025. But while we were there, we were noticing there's lots of construction works taking place inside enclosure C at Göbekli Tepe. Now, this is one of the main enclosures, the one everyone looks at.
Right.
Enclosure D is the main one, which is in the background that you can see there. But enclosure C, they're actually like rebuilding the walls and rebuilding the T pillars, so the main T pillar inside the site, actually gluing it back together like a jigsaw. As you can see here, they're kind of like just piecing it back together, which I thought was very odd. But the problem is this wall you see that they're rebuilding is going over some of the T pillars and actually covering up some of the 3D reliefs, which
Interesting.
really surprised me because this wall, they think that basically the walls were placed there between the T pillars at the very earliest point of construction in 9600 BC. But there's no actual evidence of that. There's no evidence that these walls weren't added later just to hold things up and kind of separate the enclosures. And so because you wouldn't create these 3D reliefs and then build a wall straight over it. Maybe in a few generations you might have done it just to kind of prop up the stones. So we don't know if they're reconstructing it, if it's actually based on the original design, because they haven't actually excavated below these walls and further down.
Hmm.
So they could be building over actual excavation, which needs to be done, which we'll never see again now because these are permanent. And so there
Yeah.
is a bit of an issue going on there. We even had the Japanese princess turn up, and just a few couple of days after we were there, and she kind of was having a look. She was also involved in the archaeological project because there's a Japanese team taking over one of the Tas Tepeler sites. But as you can see, see in the back there, they've actually reconstructed the T pillar,
It's
actually pieced it
huge.
back together. Yeah, it's massive. And so here's a couple of shots. Here's some shots of like before and after. You see that on the left side of both pictures.
Let me ask
That's
you real quickly, do they think that these T pillars were purposely damaged and crushed to or collapsed so that they could cover them up?
these were destroyed before the site was closed down, like
That's
nine,
what I
ten
thought.
thousand years ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so this is a part. It's what we see at Karahan Tepe,
Hmm.
where the site itself is almost deliberately damaged. We see another view of it here
Wow.
of how big. I mean, these are big.
Those are massive. Yeah.
These are like 18 feet tall, roughly. So these are beasts, So and the bedrock. You see the sort of bedrock. There's like a bedrock pedestal there. That's all carved down from bedrock. So there's like massive bedrock carving going on here. And I believe even around the edge, they had a curb kind of coming around the edge, which they would slot the T pillars in before the walls were built.
Yeah.
And you can actually see that in this reconstruction. If you look on the left-hand side, you can see that there's like a bedrock curb, like a
Mm.
shaping within the bedrock itself. And you got another image here before and after. That's the back of the T pillar. And you can actually see it's kind of like a bit rough. It's kind of like being damaged and things like that. But it gives you some impression, and I think they're going to be doing more and more of this reconstruction. But I just hope they don't do too much where they then go building over the archaeology where there could be discoveries to be made. And you also have to question, why are they spending time and money on this when 90 or to 95% of the site has not been excavated? They
Mm.
could just be doing that. Why aren't they doing that? And so that baffled. That's always baffled me.
Well,
Where they
we got to admit this because they have spent a hell of a lot of money on this huge enclosure, and so they
Yeah,
probably want to get as much tourism as they can out of the thing. So they're making this thing the prime object to go view, right?
yeah, no, for sure. But one of the things, yeah, it tidies it up as well. You look at like you can basically see like the floor now. It's a
Yeah.
lot more tidy. It tidied it up. They put all this rubble back together basically.
Hmm.
So in a way, it makes sense. It's like a logical. They're doing it at Karahan Tepe already. We can see some of the enclosures there. We'll look at shortly. And so it makes sense, but I'm just concerned about the walls mainly being built, being rebuilt, because these
Mhm.
are covering up stuff they haven't even excavated yet, I think, so this is where the issue comes in.
What makes you
But one of
say
the
that
things that,
though, Hugh? Is
yeah,
it because they have found artifacts close to the wall area and you're thinking they should be digging deeper or what?
yeah, they just haven't got down to the bedrock in a lot of places. So there's going to be
Yeah.
stuff there. I mean, there's
Oh,
a
okay.
porthole stone at the back end of Enclosure C, which Andrew and I spotted back in 2015, and it's just in the rubble, and that's just been forgotten about, and there's rubble now going over the top of it, and that should have been placed in this new wall because that would have been the northern orientation
Oh,
that
I
you
hear
get,
you.
and so so there's issues like that. But one of the interesting things that I've noticed, when you look at this, it's actually confirmed something I was researching before that, and that is the geometry. I found that they've it's almost like they've tidied it up, and you can see more of the enclosure, and it's actually confirmed what I was saying all along, that enclosure C has a very specific geometry, which is called a flattened circle modified type B, based upon the
Mhm.
work of Alexander Thom and the British stone circles. So that made my day, that is now being confirmed. But also we have enclosure D, which is behind it. That's now been tidied up. There's been all the new discoveries with the boar statue, which we'll look at in a moment. But that is now proved that there's a geometry there, which we can see here. And again
Wow.
backs up my theory that they were working with very sophisticated, very very specific types of geometry based upon the work of Alexander Thom
Right.
and the stone circles he decoded in the British Isles. And so that is quite interesting. So the more they clear away, the more they excavate, the more they kind of tidy things up, the more shapes come out, which seem to just keep coming up with these specific geometries. We get that in enclosure B as well, in enclosure A, and where since more's been cleared up, it's shown that it's an egg shape, a very specific egg shape that we find, in other stone circles around the world. So yeah, I'm quite intrigued by all this. There's a negative side where why aren't they doing more excavation? Why are they rebuilding all this stuff? But at the same time, it's clearing stuff away. It's revealing the geometries. It's revealing these new discoveries. So it's two sides to the coin. I think you've got to look at it both ways. Let's just hope with this big GPR scan that they're planning to do this month, apparently, that they'll find more and they'll be able to actually dig deeper and they'll be able to have a look at what's going on kind of under the ground there a little bit more.
Mhm.
They did the scan years ago, but I think they got better technology and they're going to do it again. So I think that's the key.
I'm curious, your theory that this is something that relates to Tom's work. Was there a roof on these enclosures or not? Because if they're doing site scans into the sky, they can't have a roof. They have to have either a sight line that opens up somewhere or no roof at all.
Well, no, it depends because you've got it's all about the walls, right? Because if the
Yeah,
walls aren't there, they're not blocking anything. You can see in between the outer T pillars in the outer ring, into the horizon. So a lot of the stuff I've been looking at, and JJ, is horizon astronomy, like the sun and the moon rising or setting on the horizon.
right.
So you don't, even if it had a roof, it won't make any difference because you're looking through like a gap, like a window between two
That's what
T
I'm wondering
pillars.
if it's like a sight line of some kind.
I mean, there are speculations that there were roofs, obviously, that this has been put forward by various kind of archaeologists, but there's no evidence. All they found is two negatives where they think two poles may have once existed.
Hmm.
But it's now been proven that this fell down from the higher up elevation of the later structures, which we know had roofs on them. These are small square structures. And so there's no direct evidence, but we've proven over and over again, and we can look at that at Karahan Tepe shortly, that even with roofs, it won't affect the kind of astronomy we're looking at
Hmm.
because there's going to be gaps in the outer walls between the T pillars in the outer ring. So makes no difference. But the other problem is that we've had engineers, structural engineers, join us on our tours there, and they've looked at it and said there can't be a roof because all the T pillars are slightly different heights,
Yeah,
and there's no damage on top of them. There would be if there's loads of wood placed on top of them, and they're not structural. They're just not structural. These are more symbolic, and these T pillars might look structural, but they're not. They're very shallow pits, very shallow sockets, And so if there was any wind or rain or movement, it would knock all the T-pillars over, especially the central ones. So it wouldn't really function like that. I mean, but again, we're speculating as much as the archaeologists are speculating that there was a roof, because there's no evidence to back it up as such yet.
Are you guys still holding to the cover date at 12,000 years ago where they covered it up, or has it gotten any older?
Well, the oldest dates they've got are close to 9,600 BC as the
Right.
construction dates. Then around 8,000 BC or thereabouts, they started. Well, there were slope slides that filled in like enclosure D and some of the enclosures. So there was a natural kind of infilling. They cleared them out. They did repairs and things like this. This is in prehistory. And then they deliberately covered up the rest of the site. This is pretty much been proven now. So that, there was this big debate that these slope slides buried the entire site, but that's literally impossible because you can't slope slide upwards. There's stuff above where the slope slide happened, fill that had been placed there by people. And Karahan Tepe, there's a scientific paper by the head archaeologist, Neshmi Karal, who's proven beyond doubt that there was a deliberate burial there as well. And so we pretty much know that for a fact that, both these sites and other Tas Tepeler sites, this is in fact how they've been preserved so well is that they
Right.
were buried,
Yeah.
but weirdly the people at the site damaged it, some of the site, and then buried it. So it's annoying, because it
That's
got
weird. Yeah.
yeah, so but not all of it. Some of it got preserved, some of it even got reconstructed,
When I was there
repaired.
a couple of years ago, I mean, the main pit was open, but you're saying that Gobekli Tepe consists of what, 12 pits?
There's about five or so enclosures have been uncovered. These are the
Five.
main ones, the main ones in the Southeast Depression.
Right.
But they've started on some other ones in the Northwest, but not continued them. This was some years ago. And so, no, very, very little, technically. But there's some smaller ones heading west from the main enclosure. You can actually see that on the scan. You can see it going to there's enclosure F, which has got an interesting a summer solstice alignment, and some other ones. They're smaller, later enclosures. Some of those have been excavated. But as you can see on just the scan they did like 10, 15 years ago, there's giant enclosures under there that they're thinking they might not excavate, which I cannot believe. This is one of the things Jimmy Corset has been talking about. Why aren't they excavating this?
Yeah, if they got $12 million, what's that money going towards?
I know it was 20 million euros at least.
Oh, euros. That's
That's
even
what we're
more
talking
than
about.
US.
That's conservation. That's building the visitor center and things like that.
Okay.
Stuff like that's what that's being spent on. So there's a potentially 21 enclosures now. That's the theory. And only five or six have been excavated, or started to be looked at properly. And so the potential is insane. I mean, what baffles me is that we have some archaeologists who are saying, oh, you don't need to dig anymore. We've got enough information. But I don't buy that because you look at what's happening at Karahan Tepe and Sayburc. They're discovering constantly, daily, whilst they're pushing forward with the excavations at those sites.
Yeah.
So it kind of makes you wonder what on earth is going on and why they want to slow it down when they could really be speeding it up, with all the interest, all the money that's coming into the country. I just hope they do. I just hope there's more done at Göbekli Tepe. And I hope this GPR scan they're planning reveals more and they can actually kind of go into where they've removed the olive trees and actually start digging.
Excellent. Hey, let's go to Karahan Tepe. I had a chance to see it in an early phase a couple of years ago. I wanted to ask you, they found a human skull there. I think it was there. And to my mind, I think I read that it was petrified stone, which means it would have a great age. I have not heard anything since in the last 24 months about that. Do you have any information?
I don't know. I don't know about a petrified skull, but I know they found bones and skeletons and skulls. They found them at Sayburc as well. I can't imagine it'd be petrified unless it was just buried in, rock and dirt and things like this.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure. I'm not sure. But this is but they're finding a lot of stuff on the top of the hill now. This is the enclosure, the main enclosure. This is brand new photos of the enclosure at the top of the hill. Just to give it a perspective, that's the site. It's a bit of a rough photo. But now they're pushing up the hill and excavating more and more up there. So there's quite a lot still being uncovered. Obviously, we know about the 7.5 foot human statue holding his
Mm.
phallus with the ribs and the kind of almost sphinx-like beard and the porthole stone. And we have this dude as well. We have the kind of the vulture that was found in that particular enclosure. But what is really fascinating to me is this: they've really gone to work on this top enclosure where this statue and this vulture were found, and they're revealing these very interesting scenario where the cut bedrock floor, giant T pillars in the center, 12 T pillars around the edge, just like we find at Göbekli Tepe, and these giant kind of benches carved out of bedrock in some cases,
Mm.
and with T pillars replaced in between, slotted into the bedrock. So I think that was a design spec before any walls were built at these sites when they were being constructed. There's lots of artifacts, stonework, detail. It is, to be honest with you, it is insane what is happening in this part of the world. It is insane. This is completely lost, buried culture, a super civilization, I call it,
Yeah.
because it's so advanced for its time. And it just astonishes me every time I go there. I go there at least twice a year, sometimes 3 times a year, and it just blows my mind constantly. I just cannot quite believe. I was going to Karahan Tepe like when nothing was there, like nothing. It was just a few pillars at little tops, 2 or 3 inches of a T pillar sticking out of the ground.
Yeah.
And I had no inkling this was underneath my feet every time I walked there. I was going there for like 6 or 7 years before they even started properly excavating.
And
So
Karahan
yeah,
Tepe is older than Gobekli Tepe. It's like 14,000 years, isn't it?
no, that's one of the arguments for it, but that's not been verified actually. They actually say it's 9,400 BC, but
9,400. Okay.
which is 200 years younger than Göbekli Tepe. But you're right in one respect because they think there was actually kind of people frequenting the area before that, and they found evidence of tools and stone, little, like arrowheads and things like that in the whole area on top and around Karahan Tepe, which go back at least 1,000 years before this.
Hmm.
And so yeah, so there's something definitely going on there. But this new enclosure I just find really, really fascinating because there's rumors of other statues have been found, but they haven't been presented to the public yet. We've got some information about that, but we can't really say much. But there's more of these stone plates, these beautiful stone plates have been uncovered, intricate carvings. There's astronomical alignments emerging from these sites as well, which is something the archaeologists aren't too keen on, but they're there. They keep turning up. It keeps happening. But there's more. I mean, if you go down the hill, if you actually go down the hill, kind of to the bottom part here, if you go down, to the bottom, they've actually found a few other things. I mean, this is one of them. So we've got the famous pillar shrine at the bottom of the hill. We've got the kind of
With that
structure
unusual
AB,
head.
it's called, with all the pillars of the stone head as the winter solstice alignment. But just in front of that, me and JJ spotted this. They've now uncovered this like a mini pillar shrine, and it's actually got one pillar or two pillars in it, carved out of bedrock as well. And so it's like a little phallus room, like there's the big phallus room structure AB, but this is like, what the hell is this? And so that really intrigued us because last year I had the opportunity to go to something that JJ's been researching for years, this site in central Turkey called Gedikaya Cave. And
Hmm.
this goes back 14 to 16,000 years old. And within the cave, you have something like this, but it's actually a stalagmite or stalactite coming out of the ground. And it's revered and been cut. It's got carved around it, a wall built around it. And it goes back to before the time of Karahan Tepe, long before. And yet we have a similar thing here as well. So JJ was kind of looking at the comparisons of those two for a long time, with the pillar shrine. Could they be representations of natural features like you get in caves, like the stalagmites, stalactites, things like this? And then this one turned up, and it looks almost like it's from the cave itself, in way back, way further west in central Turkey. So we found that quite intriguing, actually. There's little things like this, little symbols of, we believe they're like fertility symbols,
Yeah.
turning up at these sites.
So I'm curious. I don't remember seeing any tools in any of the museums. How in the hell did they cut that bedrock into flat walkways? It's just must have taken forever.
Yeah, it's a serious amount of work. I mean, I mean, like, it's impressive when you
Yeah,
think
because
about it.
they
Yeah.
cut around and create columns, right, in some of
I
the
know.
areas.
I know it's insane. I mean, so yeah, they were using, well, there's antler picks, there's flint, the fine stonework. They could use obsidian. You could actually use obsidian for it as well. All of these were available, at this time.
Mm.
And so, we do know that they certainly did it, but they didn't have any metal or anything like that. Although there was copper found at some sites, but it wasn't heated, hardened copper. It was just
Ah,
natural worked copper with hammers and things like that. So yeah, there's a lot going on. I mean, there's a few other things here as well. I mean, here's just there's a few extra carvings have been emerged. I'm not sure exactly what all of these are, but the one in the middle there, those that can see this, basically we've got a 3D relief on the front of a pillar, like you find at Göbekli Tepe, the famous 3D critter
right.
crawling down the front. There's actually one at Karahan Tepe in the new enclosure that's been uncovered. We even have nubs, like the nubs you get in Peru. There's a T pillar here with a nub on the front of it, which is like
Mm.
probably not a nub as we know it,
Yeah.
but it's there. And it's like, oh, hang on a sec, this is what the hell's that? Why is that there? And so, yeah, there's quite a lot going on. And there's also they're rebuilding their kind of, if you look on this image here, these yellow areas, this is where they're digging pits into the ground, and they're going to be building a roof at Karahan Tepe.
Oh,
This
wow.
is the news. This is like the news has been around for a while, but they haven't started yet. We were there in September, just a few weeks ago. But this is what they want it to look like. This is what they
Oh
think it's going to look
no.
like. Yeah, yeah. Oh no. And so this is like the kind of graphics that come up now. Obviously there's a positive. It's going to protect the site because this hasn't been exposed for thousands of years. But they're already digging these holes into the archaeology, and clearly going down to the bedrock to see where they can put these giant posts. So that's slightly concerning. And we're also worried that that'll block the winter solstice alignment, the sun coming through. But looking at this image here, it might not, because if they don't have sides on the roof, it's going to be open, so the winter solstice sunlight should still be able to get through and come through without being interfered with, which is kind of what we
Okay.
hope.
Yeah.
That's what we're hoping anyway. But we'll see what happens with that. I mean,
Right.
we may or may not go back there in December, because the problem is, now it's become an official site. There's cameras up everywhere. There's guards with guns.
They're
There's
busting people out there too.
Yeah, you can't just before we could wander up there and walk about and get shots of whatever we wanted. Now they're kind of a little bit strict, so we don't know if they'll even let us in for the winter solstice sunrise. But we might go and try anyway, because we feel it's like this should be a cultural phenomenon in
Yeah.
Turkey. This is like a major, we think it's a major discovery. I mean, we're not trying to blow in our own trumpet here a little bit, but we feel it needs to be kind of looked at, because if they were recording things like this, the winter solstice, back at this time, then they were very smart, very advanced people. And Gary
Yeah.
and Tepe was almost like built around this winter solstice alignment. And it could have been what their culture was kind of based upon. So it just makes you wonder. I mean, for those that can see this, we've got a time lapse of what actually happens on the winter solstice. You can see the head getting illuminated, and it lasts for 45 minutes.
Are
And
you
so,
standing in the pit to take this
no,
photograph?
no, we weren't. We're just outside it, but we had the camera
Oh,
very low.
oh, I hear
Um,
you. Okay, I was going to
yeah,
say, wow, how did you get in there?
yeah, and so this is what happens. So this alignment, it perfectly fits in with what's going on
Hmm.
at the site, and and so just let me run this by you. So regarding this new roof that they're going to build on the site, there's actually people think way back there were roofs kind of on the site when it was being used. And we think, there might be something to that. So we had a guy, Kevin Esslinger, who's a graphic 3D artist, kind of test, what it would be like when it was rebuilt. Would this winter solstice alignment still work? He put the kind of roof on it. He put the wooden beams on it, how they would
Oh,
fit T pillars
interesting.
if there were kind of if there was a construction there in ancient times. And I worked with him quite closely on it, and things like this to make sure everything was in the right place. And we just found that between the two outer T pillars on the left, the sun would come through between them, and it would almost be just below the kind of roof, as I mentioned earlier. So these alignments may not be interfered with the roof, and it actually would come through and it would illuminate the stone head. And he recreated this all on computer with the night sky in 9000 BC, and kind of put it all together. So, and even with a full thatch roof, like this is like a Native American style,
Oh,
he found the same
interesting.
thing. It would still work. It would still function, even if you just had one small window in it, which captures the movement of the sun moving across the sky. So
Very
that,
good.
yeah. So we, we're working. I'm working with Kevin on. Currently, we just started really pushing forward with our project to reconstruct Karahan Tepe.
Does it feel,
Completely.
Hugh, does it feel like there's a roof there or not? I mean, you're putting a roof on it. Do you really have a gut feeling that that's how it was?
No, I don't. I don't personally think there was. That's my opinion based
Okay.
upon the reason. But on the
That's what I
smaller
thought. That's what
structures,
I thought. That's why I'm
but
asking.
but so many people believe there was one and are kind of disputing our winter solstice alignment, saying that no,
Hmm.
they won't work because there's a roof. We decided to put it to the test and we basically came up trumps. But, so we're quite pleased about that. We even had a friend, Matt Simpson of Ancient Architects channel. He was disputing our roof theory, and he actually worked with Kevin Esslinger and myself. And he basically confirmed, he was blown away that even with a roof, it works. Absolutely stunned by this. And if people are interested, I've actually put a full article together, which people can read on academia.org. We can link it, on the show somewhere. People can
Yeah,
have a read of it. It's free.
let's
It's going to
do
be a
that.
chapter. It's going to be a chapter in our book with all the reconstructions and how and why it works. And we just encourage, because we're coming up to the winter solstice. I think, I
Mhm.
want to encourage people to kind of somehow let's try and make Karahan Tepe a thing, because this is like Newgrange, this is like Stonehenge. This is like where people can go once a year and actually have a little celebration and observing something the ancients built into the site and observed themselves.
So
And
what
so I
you're
think
saying,
this,
Hugh, is that this was, I think Schmidt, I don't know if Schmidt was at Karahan Tepe or not, but this is an observatory. This is a celestial observatory.
yes, I believe so. Yeah, but I think it's very much focused on the solstices rather than the stars.
Okay.
That's what we found, because it probably were the stars as well. That's something Andrew Collins and Graham Hancock and others have looked at more than I have. But the fact is, you've got this winter solstice alignment, which is so profound, and so you can go and see it today. There's no disputing it. It
Yeah.
works.
Yeah.
You can't really dispute it. That's what I'm so intrigued by. That it's functional, and you can see it now. And it would have worked even better, but because it would have been a slightly different, only been a degree difference in the sky. That
But
would have
how
worked better in the
sophisticated,
past.
Hugh? How sophisticated? Is it agricultural only? Or do we
No,
get into like the Maya where we have a sensitive time frame that aligns with astrology where you could actually figure out if you wanted to have a child or not?
well, this is the fertility aspect of the site. Yeah, this is something that me and
So
JJ have
you
written
believe that
about.
too. You have a
Yeah, well,
fertility
this was
aspect.
before agriculture. So this had nothing to do with agriculture. This was
Okay.
probably ceremonial and like
Mm.
ritualistic. And I know people, that's like a blanket term. People don't like it too much in some cases. But if people come to Origins, I'm going to do my lecture looking at the earlier solstices, winter solstices before this time, before Karahan Tepe. And it's going to be a big theme of the new book, which is going to be coming out next year. And I've pretty much proven already that even in Paleolithic times and other cultures before Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe, the winter solstice and the summer solstice were big deals for people, and it was all based upon initiations, rituals. It was the creation of a calendar as well, but it wasn't a calendar like for the way we use calendars. It was a calendar for feasting, for initiations, for rites of passage, for kind of changes in life, like celebrations, getting pregnant, rebirth, fertility, things like this.
Sounds very
It's-
esoteric, Hugh. Very
it is, but
esoteric.
if you look into the mythologies of the ancient cultures, which JJ's been doing, you find correlations with that. It all fits together. There's even data which I present. I'm going to present Origins. It's going in the new book, proving that there's anthropological data that hunter-gatherer groups, and we know the Karahan Tepe people were thought to be hunter-gatherers, that modern hunter-gatherer groups all follow the solstices very carefully. They're obsessed by it. And so ancient hunter-gatherers probably did the same. And there's even Paleolithic caves in France and other places that they chose, which are aligned to the rising and the setting of the sun on the solstices, and it actually beams in the cave entrances and illuminates some of the paintings. This is
Hmm.
what's mind-blowing. So there's a whole area of research we're getting deeply into, which proves that this is a much earlier solstice kind of obsession,
So,
going back up to 40,000 years.
so I just mentioned fertility. What are some other esoteric paranormal types of activities around solstices and equinoxes that you can talk about?
Yeah,
I mean, you mentioned
well,
initiations. That could be initiating into the druid, kind of theme.
yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, well, we've got a lot of things going on. There's a lot of
Uh,
aspects to this. I mean, I've actually written about this already. So if people want to kind of dive into it, they can check out this article. They can just find it on academia.org or on Scribd. It's going to be up on Substack as well.
Send me that
Uh,
article, Hugh. We'll put it up on the notes.
yeah, no, for sure. And I get into all these different aspects. We look at the Native American
Okay.
traditions that go way, way back, how that fits in with the Paleolithic caves, and even like Lascaux, for instance. This is something that Martin Sweatman got me onto. It's aligned, the entrance was aligned to the summer solstice sunset
Hmm.
precisely. And I got to give, this was a bunch of French researchers, but actually Martin Sweatman was the first to put this in his book, and it kind of opened my eyes. But then I realized it's not just one Paleolithic cave. I actually went there this summer with my family to investigate all this. They found over 130 Paleolithic caves
Oh my
are
God.
aligned to the solstices and the equinoxes. It's way beyond chance. There's millions of caves to choose from in that part of the world, but they chose specific ones where the sun would illuminate on these specific times of year. And then there's paintings, just in that particular part of the cave. I mean, there's even 3D reliefs we find in some of these that are very similar to Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe.
Yeah.
And so I think there's good evidence that there's a long-standing tradition going very, very far back, into different parts of Europe, even into Russia. We've got evidence coming out of Russia now and the kind of Caucasus area, which JJ's been looking at, which suggests this is the case. I mean, this is the data that was collected by these French academics,
Hmm.
kind of backing all this up. And so, I mean, that's the tip of the iceberg. I mean, honestly, there's a whole lot more than that. But I mean, when it comes to the Tas Tepeler sites, we're just waiting for more to be excavated to see
Yeah.
if other sites have this. I mean, one of the most exciting sites to me is we were talking about this before we came on air. Is Sayburc as well. I
Yeah. I
mean,
want to talk
there's
about Sayburc because I have not been there and I've heard amazing things about it. We should also let our listeners know, Hugh, that the museum that they've put up in Turkey to glorify Göbekli Tepe, Karahan Tepe, and these other sites is fabulous. It's very well done. And I don't know who's doing it. I don't know if it's the Turks or somebody else, but it's a very good museum in multiple languages.
it is exceptional. Yeah, I mean, they've done a full reconstruction of Enclosure D. You got a lot of the first discovered statues from Karahan Tepe, even Navali Churi is like
Yeah,
being reconstructed in the museum, which is
very well
amazing.
done.
There's stuff now from Sayburc as well, which we can see here. And Sayburc, I mean, it doesn't look like this anymore. I mean, this has been completely they've removed all the houses above.
Well, I wanted to
This,
ask you, when you and Andrew first went there, you were going into a home.
yeah.
The circle was the foundations of a house. It
This,
was terrible.
this is it. This is what I mean. So this is how fast it's moving at these other
Yeah.
sites. But the thing about Sayburc, it's just the name I want to mention because we're talking about astronomy. Say in Sayburc, say means counting in Turkish. Birch, B-U-R-C with a thing on the C, means sign of the zodiac. And which so it's like counting and the sign of the zodiac. It's almost saying the name of the site. It could be an ancient name. And even Burk in Kurdish means watchtower. And we know there used to be a tower at the site at
Hmm.
Sayburc, which got demolished in the 1940s. We know
Oh,
this because we spoke to all the families that have been there since that time. And so this is like a Jericho kind of tower we're talking about here. So it gets more epic the more you look into it, really. But for a long time with Sayburc, it looked like this. And then we went back there, it's about a year and a half
oh
ago,
my
it looked
God,
like this.
great
So
shot.
half of it was uncovered. This was like a year and a half ago. And this is like now the whole house is gone. This is a 3D scan. And you can see there's a huge area. But now this is it. This is like an exclusive, actually. I haven't shown this to anybody. This is what it looks like now.
Amazing
This is it. So,
photos.
so this is just one of the enclosures, mind you. This is one. Okay, this isn't like the entire site. We'll look at some of the other new stuff as well. So it's just blowing my mind. The more we look into it, we can see that here as well. You can kind of get a sense. And this is about what, 30 feet across, something like that. Here's an aerial shot of it, one of the areas they're excavating. But what really intrigued me is the fact that the shape of it fits in with my research on geometry perfectly. And you can see that here. This is again one of the egg shapes of Alexander Thom, which is now being found at Sayburc as well. Again, I haven't mentioned this is the first time I've mentioned this anywhere as well. So this is like, brand new stuff coming out of here. So it's really compelling what is coming out of the ground at Sayburc for sure.
What does Sayburch mean? You give us the definition. Is it also a observatory, or is
Well,
it
it
more
means
of a ritualistic kind of meeting place?
well, it's a bit of both, I think. But the name kind of, if it's an ancient name, I don't know. But it means counting and sign of the zodiac and watchtower. Which is really odd.
Watchtower. Wow.
Yeah, it's really bizarre to have that. But the more they've done excavation here, I mean, we know the main enclosure has now been excavated. They found human bones actually inside one of the square pits just next to the main enclosure. They've actually found more here than they're letting on. We know there's more here.
What does
We
that
talked to
mean?
one. We talked to one of the locals, and we saw some images of something that's going to be revealed very soon. And I'm not really allowed to talk about it right now, but again, it should be out in the next few weeks. But we've seen it. There's an amazing discovery that's being made. A little clue is that it's going to be something like one of these. Let's just say that for now. But so with Sayburch, you've got this whole area here they're now excavating there's a whole area to the south. There's lots more. They're digging deep into. Luckily, there was a whole area of the village that no one built on. This was like the sort of play park, where no one touched. It was sort of like a sacred area. They didn't really touch it. And they've been digging there. They found human remains. They found beautiful statues, some intricate carvings on them, and a whole lot more. And the other thing is, another really weird thing is that in one part of the site, it's just on the left of the image here, where they thought it was a Roman quarry, which was kind of being carved out like in Roman times, like 8,000 years later than when it was Sayburch was being built. This dates back to at least 9,000 BC. And I mean, look how the quarrying on the left there, that is Roman quarrying, they think. And so I've got this crazy idea that the Romans discovered Sayburch and then left it because look at this, right? So you got this here, you got this you got this potentially a Roman quarry. We know they were quarrying in the area. There's another hill just next to this where they were definitely quarrying. But look, then on the left there, you've got this beautiful little kind of Tas Tepeler style carving, which you can see here. That is just next to this Roman quarry, and they literally left it alone, haven't touched it, and they're within 10 feet of the main enclosure. And so I think I'm absolutely convinced the Romans discovered Sayburch, there might be records somewhere of them talking about this. I'm going to start looking into this because there's something strange going on here because a lot of the sites, some of the other Tas Tepeler sites, seem to have this where the Romans got really close to where many of them are, but then left them as though they were kind of warned away by the locals or something like
Hmm.
this. It's like, don't touch that area. You can't touch that. But let's just say though, there's a lot of human statues have come out of the ground. Karahan Tepe, we've got Urfa Man that came out of a site in Shanlurfa itself. We've
Hmm.
got this little saber man there, and we've got the Navali Churi head, which was part of a large statue on the, with the kind of serpent coming down the back. So all of these, so virtually every site they're finding these human statues, and so watch this space with Sayburch because something is going to be announced very very soon. But there's more though. There's sites. They've just started excavating at a site that we've been investigating for several years called Ayan Lahoyak. This is the official fence they put around the site. This is a giant Tas Tepeler site, probably 12,000 years old or a bit less. And this is now being investigated by a Japanese team. And it's just begun. When we were there, this just got initiated. But we've been going to this site for years. And the thing that really excites me about the site is that we've actually found T-pillars there before. Now, weirdly, a paper came out many years ago by Bahattin Selik, talking about Ian Lahoyak and about it's definitely something going on. And they found a few little pieces there, like we can see in the image on the right. And he said there's no T pillars have been found. So me and JJ went there in 2022, and what did we find? We found a T pillar just lying on the ground. Here we go. And we couldn't believe it. And this is definitely a T-shaped pillar. You know, this is like, it's got a little carving on it as well. I got a 3D scan of it as well. And I was like, whoa, I couldn't quite believe it. So, you know, it was JJ's kind of intuition that kind of got us to the right spot where we kind of found it. And so we were the first people to discover a T pillar at Jan Lahoyak. So keep that in mind, because this is going to be massive at Jan Lahoyak.
What's going on in this area, Hugh? Is this a big post Ice Age push? Who are these people? What do we? I mean, it's still very, very uncertain as to who are these people. Where do they get their data from? Are they ex-Atlanteans? Are they ex-ancient site people that we just don't know about? What's the story on this?
That's a good question. I mean, I think there's a bunch of influences coming in from different directions. Okay, this has been talked about by academics now. JJ and Andrew have both been on it as well. Coming in from the Russian steppes, coming down from the Caucasus. There's a big influence there. You got from further south in Levant, you've got the Natufians, who were very advanced. They were building structures. They were doing early, attempts at farming and even using geometry in some of their designs.
Really?
They all came up from the south. There's very good evidence, a site called Chakmak Tepe, possibly a couple of others, of Natufian ideas being present there. So there's definitely a Natufian influence. Now, these Natufians were a lot smarter than you think. And I think there's a misconception when it generally comes to hunter-gatherers. I mean, people just assume hunter-gatherers are kind of savage types, literally hunting and gathering, but there's a whole different thing. And since I've been doing my research on the solstices, going further and further back in time, going back 40,000 years, the hunter-gatherers, to me, were smart as hell. They had the same brain capacity as us. They didn't have all the kind of problems we have to deal with in society now. And they just had time to dwell on things and research things and kind of feel into things. And I think they were studying the stars to a high degree, but they were also developing symbolism and language and other ideas that we don't really see. But if you dig into it, you can find things there. So I think the hunter gatherers, and I think when different groups came together, there was explosions of ideas, and I think explosions of taking lots of magic mushrooms and psychedelics and brewing beer and things like this. So they were going into altered states as well, bringing different plant medicines to one another and expanding their consciousness. So I think there's a development which may have been slow, but it may have had bursts of ideas. So you also have people coming in from the west as well as the Tufians from the south. You have the influence from the Russian steppes. Coming in from the west, you have the sites, like I mentioned earlier, Göbekli Cave, where there's clearly evidence of like fertility ritual going on. And also from the west, you've got the whole Paleolithic people as well from the caves there. And
Right.
So I think there's so many, it was like a whole admixture. And this was right at the end of the last ice age, at the end of the Younger Dryas.
Exactly.
Where the weather just started improving. Within a few generations of that, they were building Göbekli Tepe. And so, but you must remember, there were sites, some of these sites, like Chakmak Tepe, some of the other Tas Tepeler sites were earlier and built before Göbekli Tepe. So they were already in this area doing things and developing it. So I think there's a different way to look at it now. So there's, for a long time, people have been saying, no, it's just like a massive explosion. People came from Atlantis, these highly advanced people. And then other people say it was a gradual build up. But I think there's a bit of both. I think there's like different groups coming in, explosions of ideas, but they were hunter-gatherers, as well. But they were they were much more sophisticated than people realize. I mean, when I spoke recently at the Gaia Ancient Civilizations conference, when I mentioned I think hunter-gatherers are smart, people chuckled in the audience. I'm like, this is the problem.
Well, because they think that's the most rudimentary form of humanity.
Yeah, but I think it's because the problem is I've done all this research on them, so I know I'm getting into their mindset, whereas most people haven't. Most people haven't. They just think they're savages, but they're not. This is where people get locked in different, they get stuck in their research. I think you
That's
have to open
true.
your mind to the fact that these people in prehistoric times were just like us.
Yeah.
They were as advanced as us in the mind.
What I think is an interesting fact, and I've only been there once. You're there twice a year. You've been there like, I don't know, for 5, 6 years. They haven't found a burial or a tomb or a complete skeleton, which I find, given all these new sites, kind of peculiar. And
Yeah.
and I don't know if it's because of the weather conditions that the bones just do not last or whatever. What's the story on that? Because that would help us a little bit if we could
Yeah.
do some testing on bones and see the skeletal capacity of the brain and so forth.
They've actually just got into that recently. Sayburc, those that can see this, is just a very, this is just a few bones and skulls thrown into like a pit. They were burying underneath the kind of domestic areas, apparently. There's been like about 7 or 8 burials found at human remains found at Göbekli Tepe, but there's no elaborate burials or like, graves created as such. There's very limited amount. Happened more in the Levant, where you have the kind of plaster, and like paint, ochre and things like that put on the skeletons. You get that up near the Tigris River to the northwest. Sorry, the northeast, up on the Tigris area, that sites like Kortik Tepe and Boncuklu Tala, but not so much in the Tas Tepeler region. No, but they've just found at Sayburc. This is actually from a year and a half ago. This photo, but they found this cache of bones and skulls in one area in the new excavation at Sayburc. So
Wow.
that's going to be announced soon. At Chayanu, another site further north, which has been known about for years, we visited there as well. They found this whole discovery of this red ochre floor that goes back to 9,600 years ago. They found caches of bones. They found what's called the skull building there, where they got hundreds of skeletons and skulls that were decapitated and placed into like in a certain manner in a very peculiar way. And so there is a few little spots of that, but no elaborate burials have been found and very few human remains. But they have found some, and they're now starting doing the testing on them. And so this is where the real data is going to come from about where
That's
these
going to
people
be
came from.
fantastic.
Yeah.
That's great news. Yeah, it's funny because of all the information that they're discovering in the excavations. There's no kings or queens or leaders or burial of a well-known individual from any of that area. It's funny.
Yeah, it just doesn't seem to be, unless it's just not been dug up yet. I mean, there might be a whole kind of one of the sites might just be a burial site. Who
Wouldn't that
knows?
be amazing?
We just don't know. So we just got to wait and see. It's all like it's an exciting time. This is like the time of discovery. This is like this is it. We're in it. It's not
Yeah,
like, when Egypt was being discovered, when the Mayan pyramids were being discovered, it would have been
yeah,
amazing to be there. But this is happening now. This
yeah,
is it. And so we've got a real opportunity as, individuals and researchers and enthusiasts to get out there and kind of appreciate it
yeah,
as it's happening. So although there's a lot of pushback between alternative people and archaeologists, at the end of the day, we just got to celebrate what's being discovered, and it's all coming out. So let's just enjoy the process.
I think conventional or orthodox archaeology still has a problem with the dates that are coming back on this. And although it's verified, we have real science going on, we have real archaeology, we have real excavations. I would say a lot of people just can't grasp it. That just doesn't feel like they can hold on to it. What do you say to that?
Yeah, yeah, I think there's a lot to say about the whole kind of situation. I think one of the things I like, I mean, is that you can go there and visit these sites when they're excavating. At least they cover them up in the winter, pretty much, so you can actually go there and actually see it happening. And they sometimes, if you get on the right side of the archaeologist, they'll come and talk to you and explain what they found and things like this. So there's a lot of good happening, and with the what the archaeologists are doing, but there's also, there's a lot of debate as to how they're doing it. I mean, why are they reconstructing Enclosure C? Why aren't they excavating more? Why aren't they kind of releasing these new discoveries to the public quicker? There's debates about that. But at the end of the day, we've got to just, there's nothing me or you can do. We just got to hope they're going to release everything and keep excavating. But the pace they're going at Sayburch, the pace they're going at these other sites like Sefer Tepe, Habet Zuvan, and Karahan Tepe especially, they ain't messing about. They're getting on with it, and they're not going to stop. In fact, the roof they're planning Karahan Tepe is actually quite interesting because it's not just a fixed roof like you have at Göbekli Tepe. They're actually going to be, it's actually kind of adaptable, so you can extend it up the hill and into different directions. So they can keep excavating, and then they can extend the roof,
Oh, they
which is
can't
like,
keep excavating on the area that's going to be on exhibit?
oh no, they'll keep excavating. But the thing
Oh,
is, if they expand the space they're doing, they can
oh,
they can
okay.
then add a roof section to that bit, so they can preserve it as well. So there's no limit there. Whereas Göbekli Tepe's got a limit. There's only roofs in certain places. So they might have put a whole new roof up there at some point as well. I
Yeah.
mean, so let's wait and see. But there's one other discovery I want to mention at Karahan Tepe, because I just realised we didn't mention this. Is this was discovered? This is a stone of quite a large stone bowl carved out of solid stone. Looks like basalt. That had another bowl within it, and underneath it was a stone plate, and within the small bowl were two or three what looked like stone donuts, like circular stones, different types of stone with a hole carved out in the middle. They're not donuts. And then there's three animal carvings, like you've got like what looks like a leopard, you've got like a vulture, and you've got some other strange creature. I can't remember the name of it. And these were found going into the holes. Yeah. And so you can, if those that can see this is the imagery here, and you got another view of it there, and you got scepters as well, stone scepters. That's probably like two and a
Oh,
half
they're
feet
little
wide.
fetishes. Okay.
Yeah, and so this is like a ritualistic offering, but it's
Yeah.
just the holes really interest me because that is like the porthole stones where you have these alignments coming through and so you got certain animals going through there, which were probably symbolic of certain processes of initiation and things like that, with the personal that
Mhm.
you'd be like, as a shaman you become the animal, you go through the hole
Oh,
on the
good. Yeah.
solstice.
Shamanistic tools. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a lot of this is now being discovered. They haven't said where this was actually found in Karahan Tepe, so it could be relevant once we know.
Mhm.
But this is just one of the discoveries that came out just a few months ago. This is
Wow.
actually on display temporarily it's in Ankara. It's actually in the sort of palace buildings in Ankara of the president. There's actually a sort of display of Tas Tepeler stuff there. So some of the,
Oh.
it's not in the Ankara Museum. It's not in the main, it's in another building. So we weren't able to go there. We couldn't see it for ourselves, unfortunately. But if anyone does go there, get some photos and some film clips, send them.
Send them to Hugh. I need them for my book. Hey, I
Yeah.
want to ask you as we're concluding, Hugh, we talk about John Burke and the telluric energy fields like the Mayan temples and Egypt and stuff like that. Have you noticed or have you spoken to any of the locals who can feel any significant telluric energy in any of these sites?
Yeah, I mean, there was some actual research done as well. I mean, back in the 2000s, Paolo de Bertolis of Trieste University, he did some analysis of enclosure D at Göbekli Tepe and
Oh,
actually found a magnetic anomaly within it, which I thought was kind of interesting. And I mentioned that in my little book as well about, it's going to be a big thing about it in my upcoming book with JJ. And and he actually found like a spiraling magnetic anomaly within it. But he was also found very sophisticated acoustics in there as well. So clearly they were building upon sites or areas which had a natural kind of telluric enhancement, like John Burke. I'm actually going to be writing about him because, me and you are both big fans of the late brilliant John Burke and the Seed of Knowledge, Stone of Plenty book, which I think is a revelatory book. And I think that's going to, if that can be applied to this area, which it looks like it can now,
yeah,
especially when we consider that agriculture was developed within 200 years of Göbekli Tepe being built.
yeah,
Did they come up with some way of enhancing their seeds and grains to like grow the food or something like this?
yeah,
So we have to question that kind of thing. But I think, you can't really go inside these structures anymore. Very few. I mean, you can't. We were lucky; we got inside Sayburc, but you're so excited because it's like it's an opportunity of a lifetime. You don't really think to get your dowsing rods out and start meditating. You kind of like, you're trying to like kind of just
you're going to
deal
be
with it.
shooed
Feel,
away with
yeah,
guns
yeah.
pulled out of their
But
holsters.
but if anyone does go there, if anyone's got any, their own experiences. I'm very interested in direct experience that people have at these sites, especially in the Tas Tepeler region, because I would be intrigued, but I find there's something about Karahan Tepe that gets me. I don't know what it is. I feel like I've been there before. That's what it feels like. That's the weird kind of reincarnation kind of
Yeah, yeah,
feeling I get with it. It's something about that place for me. Other people have it with different sites, obviously. And especially when me and JJ, when we first discovered that winter solstice thing, it was all like all these synchronicities led to that point that all fell into place over a few months and then peaked a few days before it for us to discover that. And if we just think if we hadn't discovered that, hadn't followed the synchronicities, we would never have discovered that. So that kind of thing I take notice of.
you need
It's
to
like
open your book with that. We were having coffee, and all of a sudden we must
yeah.
go to Karahan Tepe.
Well, but we were getting messages from people in Turkey
Oh,
who were saying, "Oh, by the way, you have to go before this date because it will
yeah.
close then. They're going to cover it up." And so I thought, "Shit, we better get our tickets booked." So and then we got delayed and we couldn't get to the site, and then we were forced. The only time we could go was first thing in the morning because officials were coming in that day to close it up for the winter. So we had to go first thing in the morning because they were going to come in at 9 a.m. or something. And that's why we were forced to go at sunrise. And we weren't even know there would be a winter solstice thing there, but then a really good one turned up there, so we were quite pleased. So you got when that kind of thing happens, like you're having synchronicities, you're having kind
Yeah,
of you kind of go with you realize there's something significant taking place, and so I get that at some sites. I have some
yeah.
weird dark stuff at other sites.
I
Amazing
didn't know you were
experience.
into the paranormal. This is all new. This should be a
Yeah,
chapter where you're.
I've got a calling to it. Yeah, you could say
Yeah,
that.
no, no,
I
no.
kind
I
of
mean, I'm serious. I mean, because you're speaking about intuitive information, casual discussions that turn out to be major discoveries and so forth. So that's
yeah,
great. Yeah. Hey, as
you
we
can.
conclude, why should we be interested? Why should we care about these tepes? Should we even, bother?
Well, this is it. Well, the thing is, right? You got Stonehenge, you got the pyramids, you got the pyramids of Mexico. None of them are that old. Seriously, none of them are very old. I mean, Stonehenge is what 5,000 years old.
Yeah.
Pyramids of Mexico, the oldest is 3,000 years old, maybe 2,000 years old. And
Yeah.
so this is 12,000 years old to 11,000 years old. This is a whole different time frame. And the sophistication is equal or more advanced than all these other cultures that came 5 to 8,000 years later.
Hmm.
So, and we're not just talking one site. We're talking multiple sites. They're talking about like 40 plus sites now in that region. Each of those has multiple stone circles and these enclosures, these alignments, thousands of statues, artifacts. And it just doesn't quit. It's like, we thought it was going to quit after, Göbekli Tepe, but they found a whole civilization there. And so and the fact that it was buried, there's civilizations and cultures and armies and people have passed through that area for the last 9,000 or plus years and didn't even know it was there. So it's been completely written out of all the history books, all the traditions, all the cultures. And so it's like this whole fresh discovery of something that's just it's the lost civilization everyone's talking about. This is it.
Oh, you
You
actually
know,
feel it's a lost civilization.
it literally was lost. It was buried.
Yeah.
No
Yeah.
one knew it was there, and so this is what's so compelling about it.
I'm sure
Then
it'd
you
be
have
nice
to,
if we had a body that was buried, entombed with a little bit of data.
yeah. Well, I think that's happening. I think the DNA stuff's going to come out anytime soon. Hopefully, the
Yeah.
sooner the better. But obviously, with human remains, there's a whole process they have to go through and everything else.
Yeah.
But I think people we've got to understand this was buried. This was forgotten about for like 9 to 10,000 years. So this is when me and JJ had that revelatory moment at Karahan Tepe, seeing this winter solstice, the first people to see it in like 9,000 years or more. It blew our minds because it dawned on us days later. My God, what if we hadn't have seen that? What if they then built over it with a roof or something? and it had never been discovered. So what else is there that hasn't been discovered yet? That hasn't even been dug up? If we're finding stuff. At the first excavation was done, we found something significant. So the list goes on. At all these sites, there could be major things taking place. And then we have to look at, like, I think I've got to give Graham Hancock a bit of credit. He wrote this fantastic article about the story of Gilgamesh. The whole Sumerian thing and everything
Right.
else, and about that Sayburc being a representation, literally of that. The whole kind of narrative scene that they discovered there was actually part of this Gilgamesh story. And so he's now piecing together this Mesopotamian connection. And so all these cultures like Egypt, Stonehenge, Sumerians, now we're starting to see who they got influenced by. We're starting to
Mm.
see the influences, like with the geometries from my research, the astronomy, the Gilgamesh myths, JJ's research on the symbolism
Hmm.
and Golden Gate of the ecliptic and everything else. And so we're starting to piece together a whole missing chapter of human history thanks to these discoveries in southeast Turkey.
Fantastic, Hugh. I want to thank you for this presentation. For those of you listening, we'll have this available on YouTube. I'm going to twist Hugh's arm and get a few photographs for our Facebook page as well. Obviously, we can't have the same number on our Facebook page that we have on the YouTube channel, but really cutting edge. Hugh's got the latest and the greatest. So thanks, Hugh. I really appreciate it. Give us your contact information. We know about Origins. We got the link to that, but give us your own personal data. What's your website? What's the other Facebook links and things like that?
Yeah, well, just they can just search Hugh Newman. They're going to
Mhm.
find me. This is a little book I published with Wooden Books. It's now out in America, expanded, updated version. That's available now. And megalithomania.co.uk is the website. Obviously, I'm speaking at another conference in America, the Quest for Ancient Civilizations
Oh,
conference. I'm
right.
presenting all the latest data. That's the 5th to the 7th of December in Scottsdale, Arizona. People can just search for that. Organized by Robert Dakota of Worldviews Media and David Childress, whole amazing bunch of speakers there. And yeah, and people can kind of basically just check out our website. We obviously we go back to Turkey quite frequently. We take groups out there and things like that, so people can kind of, if they want to, they can join us. I know you go out there as well.
Yeah, you
Um,
average what, 3 to 4 tours a year, right?
yeah, we do a few.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there you go. Okay,
yeah, there's a
Malta. Oh,
few of them.
Malta.
Yeah,
Excellent.
yeah, yeah, we do. Yeah, we do other areas. Well, the Malta connection now with Tas Tepeler is emerging, is coming out. Even the island as well. We're doing Ireland, but we're doing a few others. We're heading out to Peru and other places, Cambodia, just because it's delightful. And obviously, we encourage people, to just check out the website, go and do your own exploring. You don't have to come with us on the tours if you don't want to do that kind of thing. But we are super passionate. We really want to, especially when it comes to Turkey, we want to show people what's going on there, because
Right.
you can go there, you can go yourself, and you're going to miss loads of things if you don't know what you're looking at. It's all very intricate. So we do encourage people to check all that out. There's a whole world to explore.
Fantastic. Hugh, as always, a real lesson on what's going on, and I appreciate your time and continued success.
Thanks, Cliff. It's been great talking to you.